These days, I go by the name Sarah, and my days are spent working alongside my husband, John, in his family's company. Richard, my father in law, leads the small yet inviting enterprise with about 6 dedicated employees. Richard, a man of few words, rarely involves himself in the day-to-day operations, leaving that responsibility to John, the heir apparent and our company's future president. John tirelessly pursues clients and secures new projects, demonstrating his unwavering commitment to the company's growth. During significant projects, the entire team comes together, creating a lively and enthusiastic atmosphere. I've been a part of this spirited environment for a decade, ever since I married John. One evening, I returned home early to prepare dinner, only to be met with criticism from my mother-in-law, Nancy, who had retired from the family business when John and I got married. Despite her initial excitement about retirement, it seemed that with more free time on her hands, she had taken to scrutinizing my choices. As I began preparing dinner, she remarked, "Hey, Sarah, how long do you plan on clinging to our family business?" Confused, I asked her to clarify. In response, Nancy, with a cutting tone, accused me of marrying John because I couldn't find work elsewhere and insinuated that I was taking advantage of the family company. Sighing inwardly, I realized that accusations like these had become increasingly frequent. I explained that joining John's company was my choice, not a result of unemployment, but Nancy dismissed my explanation, claiming she saw through my real intentions. The issues with Nancy extended beyond words. Although she had promised to take care of the household after quitting her job, she rarely lifted a finger. Despite my father-in-law's requests for her to contribute, she insisted it was now the daughter-in-law's responsibility. As a result, I often found myself cleaning up after her meals. When I finally gathered the courage to address the issue, Nancy's response was far from understanding. She rebuffed my request, expressing anger and asserting her authority as the homeowner. One sunny afternoon, I hesitantly approached Nancy, diplomatically mentioning the issue with dishes being left in the sink. Rather than understanding, her response was sharp and unyielding. She accused me of trying to give her orders in her own house, dismissing my role as just a daughter-in-law. Her words unveiled the delicate balance in our family dynamics, and she even went on to express a preference for John's younger sister, Jessica, who she claimed was far more considerate and understanding than I could ever be. Jessica, however, had been notably absent from our wedding, having canceled at the last minute. Later, John confided in me that Jessica had spent the previous night indulging with friends and was nursing a hangover, which explained her absence. Despite this setback, Jessica pursued her dreams relentlessly, moving to Manhattan after college to explore the world of fashion design. In an attempt to shift the conversation away from the tension, I praised Jessica's dedication and hard work, mentioning her success in Manhattan. However, Nancy's opinion of Manhattan remained unfavorable. She deemed it a cold and impersonal city unsuitable for someone as warm-hearted as Jessica. Then she redirected her attention to me, pointing out that I hailed from Manhattan, implying that my demeanor was somehow influenced by the city. Caught in this exhausting exchange, I realized that if I didn't start preparing dinner soon, it would be much later than usual. Despite my internal frustrations, I maintained composure and suggested we continue the conversation later, focusing on getting dinner ready. Nancy reluctantly retreated to the living room, leaving me alone with my thoughts amidst the clatter of cooking utensils. Both Richard and John were aware of Nancy's mistreatment towards me and attempted to intervene whenever possible. However, their efforts seemed futile, as Nancy's hostility only escalated whenever confronted. Ironically, whenever Richard and John addressed Nancy's behavior, she redirected her anger towards me, becoming even more hostile. Her once gentle demeanor twisted with disdain, and her words cut deeper with each confrontation. While I had never faced physical violence, the emotional toll of Nancy's words was significant. Richard and John's support had been my solace, allowing me to somewhat endure Nancy's harsh words. However, something unimaginable occurred one morning during the rush of preparing for work, altering the dynamics of our family forever. I rushed through my morning routine, as per usual, preparing for another day of work. Suddenly, Nancy's voice pierced the air. Oh my, what a mess they trash here. Before I could comprehend her words, she doused my handbag with a bucket of water, leaving me stunned, a blend of shock and anger rendering me speechless. What are you doing, Nancy? I managed to stammer, my voice trembling with disbelief. Her response was flippant, resembling that of a mischievous child. Oh, was that your stuff? I thought it was just a big piece of trash. Her casual dismissal of the situation infuriated me. Even if you thought it was trash, who pours water on it? What kind of mindset is that? Now the carpet is all wet. What about the vacuum cleaner? My words tumbled out in a jumble of anger and confusion as I frantically emptied the water-soaked contents of my bag, including documents I needed for work, onto the table. Nancy remained nonchalant, showing no signs of remorse or concern for my distress. Because you don't need to go to work anymore, she stated matter-of-factly. Baffled, I found myself sitting opposite Nancy in our living room, bathed in morning light. Her expression was colder, more resolute than usual, as if she had made a decision that would alter everything. Excuse me, I responded, laden with confusion and surprise. You've been clinging to this house for 10 years, but finally, I can get rid of you. Her words pierced my heart, her voice carrying a level of anger and determination I had never heard before. My mind reeled and my heart filled with sorrow. Getting rid of me? I questioned, disbelief evident in my voice. Her words made me feel like an outsider in this family. Actually, my daughter is joining the company, so we need you to leave. Today's your last day, she continued, her tone cutting. All you have to do today is bow your head to your father-in-law and John, apologizing for all the trouble you've caused. Her mocking laughter further wounded me. She was using my position at work to force me out. Years of dedication and hard work suddenly reduced to nothing. Dumbfounded, my heart filled with disbelief at her merciless decision. I had poured my heart and soul into this family, but it seemed my sacrifices meant nothing to her. The audacity of her actions left me appalled. After a decade of dedicated service, she could ask me to leave to make room for her daughter. It felt like my years of effort were being rendered worthless. Are you sure about this? Wasn't Jessica working in a clothing store in Manhattan? My words echoed my confusion and apprehension. My job wasn't merely a source of income. It was my avenue for self-fulfillment. Meanwhile, Jessica, my sister-in-law, had grown weary of city life and chosen to return home. Citing the coldness of Manhattan's people, I had offered her a job upon her return, and she had agreed immediately. Now my mother-in-law wanted me out of the house. Her words were difficult to believe. With a single decision, she was ready to overturn my life, disregarding my place in the family without even listening to me. I've written your resignation letter, she said, handing me an envelope, effectively expelling me from the house. In that moment, my heart shattered completely. Everything I had built over the years was reduced to nothing, treated like a mere piece of paper. Her actions severed our family bond irreparably. I made my way to the company, just a brisk 3-minute walk from home. My mind was a whirlwind of apprehension and anticipation as I walked under the cool morning sky. Each step felt heavy with the weight of what was to come. Upon reaching the office, I shared with my father-in-law Richard and my husband John. I shared what my mother-in-law had said. Their faces displayed shock and thinly veiled anger, yet they remained composed. They suggested that maybe it was time for me to resign to show her the reality of the situation. Their words sent my heart into turmoil. Having worked tirelessly in our family-run business for years, I barely knew what a long vacation felt like, aside from brief respites during Thanksgiving and the holiday season. Encouraged by John and Richard's gentle words, I made up my mind to embark on a little trip. As I packed, I found myself pondering deeply about my life, my choices, and what lay ahead. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law Jessica, who had come to replace me at the company, shockingly didn't show up until 1:00 p.m. Her irresponsible attitude left John and Richard, who had been holding the fort in my absence, in a state of dismay. Jessica seemed utterly disinterested in understanding the work, despite their attempts to explain it to her. Hearing about this, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety about the future of our company, even as I looked forward to my trip. Departing without encountering my mother-in-law, I swiftly set off, enjoying the view outside of the train during the journey. I took time to reflect on my life, considering the past, the present, and what lay ahead, all while savoring the local seafood delicacies. My contemplation delved into thoughts about myself, my family, and our business. However, the tranquility of my fourth day was abruptly shattered when Jessica called me in tears. "What's going on?" Mom said it was an easy job, just sitting in a chair, but John and Dad are acting like I can't do anything right. Her words, likely influenced by my mother-in-law, caught me off guard. Despite my leisurely surroundings, I realized it was time to address the situation. I asked Jessica about her proficiency with computers. Hesitantly, she replied, "Well, I usually watch videos online, and oh, I play games too." This response hinted at her limited knowledge of basic computer functionalities. Digging deeper, I inquired about her familiarity with software like Word or Excel. Her puzzled expression and lack of skill in professional settings became evident. Further questions about image editing, video editing, or audio editing software left her bewildered. "What's all that?" she replied. Considering her background in the Manhattan apparel industry, it was unlikely she had never used a computer for tasks like managing sales data or recording customer information. I asked about handling calculations for sales or filling in documents. While she confidently claimed she could handle it, her confidence waned when questioned about calculating tax. This particular inquiry aimed to test her mathematical skills and ability to apply them in a business context. It became clear that Jessica, despite other skills, felt insecure about the required skills set for the job. Her discomfort, especially with calculations, might explain the criticism she faced from Richard and John. It was crucial to give my mother-in-law and her allies, who sought to oust me, a taste of their own medicine. To address this, I decided to start by stating, "Since you're taking over my job," and offer a perspective that would shed light on the challenges and expectations they were imposing on Jessica. "I expect you to handle the accounting tasks efficiently. Be mindful of email etiquette. A casual tone suitable for friends is utterly inappropriate for business communication. Also, you'll be responsible for scheduling the staff shifts. Though our team is small, everyone's requests for time off are carefully considered, so make sure not to prioritize your own convenience over theirs." As I continued to outline my expectations, I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. "But I was told I wouldn't have to do anything. Why are there so many tasks? I didn't come back home for this," she exclaimed before abruptly ending the call. In the following 3 days, I decided to enjoy sightseeing in Manhattan, where Jessica had fled. My experience taught me that not everyone in Manhattan is cold-hearted. In fact, it seemed rarer to find people as cold-hearted as my mother-in-law and Jessica, who had conspired to drive me away. A week after leaving my job, I returned to my in-laws' house. Upon my arrival, Nancy, with her face flushed red, confronted me with a burst of anger. "How dare you make my daughter cry? You won't get away with this," she exclaimed furiously, her eyes burning with anger and misunderstanding. She made a move to grab me, but John and Richard quickly intervened, trying to calm her down. However, her anger seemed far from subsiding. "Jessica is crying because she was scolded for trying to boss around her employees. Despite her inability to do anything right, it's not Sarah's fault. Besides, Sarah hasn't been here for a week, so there's no way she could have upset Jessica," John explained, his voice carrying a weight as he tried to convey the facts and clear the misunderstanding. "But it's because of her. This woman is the reason for Jessica's suffering," Nancy retorted emotionally, directing her baseless suspicions towards me. Her words lacked any foundation of truth. "Where is Jessica, by the way?" I asked, looking around the living room, but Jessica was nowhere to be seen. Her absence added more mystery to the already puzzling situation. It didn't matter to me that Nancy was upset about Jessica, but Jessica had no place to go since she terminated her lease in her Manhattan apartment. I expected Jessica to be at her parents' house, but her absence raised questions. Jessica's locked herself in her room. She's been crying and saying she doesn't want to go to work anymore, John explained. It seemed like Jessica had run away from learning the job well. It was understandable that she would find it challenging, considering she lacked the skills to fill in for me. You've been poisoning John and Richard against me, haven't you? If not, they wouldn't say the company ran better with me than with the incompetent Jessica, Nancy accused vehemently. Her words were filled with long-standing misunderstandings and prejudices, leaving me utterly perplexed. She seemed to have always viewed me as an adversary, her words reflecting years of misconceptions. John let out a heavy sigh, his face showing weariness and frustration with the tangled web of emotions in this family. He'd tried repeatedly to resolve the misunderstandings among family members, but his efforts seemed far from fruitful. Mom, I know it might sound a bit odd coming from me, but Sarah is truly exceptional at her work. She has a certification in bookkeeping, and her secretarial skills are top-notch. Moreover, she has studied Spanish and even has experience studying abroad. When it comes to dealing with multiple languages at our company, Sarah is the one who handles everything, John explained with a sense of pride, and his mother, Nancy, looked utterly surprised. Nancy had assumed that I quit my job as soon as I joined the family, so she had no idea about my contributions and achievements at work. Wow, that sounds like something straight out of a TV drama. Actually, back in college, I dedicated myself to obtaining various certifications, immersing myself in my studies to the point where I hardly participated in clubs or had time for romantic relationships. It was during this phase of my life that I met John, who visited my company for business. Inadvertently, I found myself sharing the story of how John and I first met, though I realized that wasn't what Nancy wanted to hear. I steered the conversation back to the original topic. In a nutshell, I was entrusted with a wide array of responsibilities at the company, from handling accounting tasks to schedule coordination, liaising with other companies, and managing employee shifts. There were numerous tasks under my purview. Thanks to that, I could focus on reaching out to other companies for business deals. The work environment became much more comfortable compared to the times when Nancy was around, John added, leaving Nancy with her mouth agape in amazement. Just then, Richard, John's father, chimed in with a comment that took me by surprise. We're going to shut down that company soon. Actually, Jessica made a big blunder. Despite being asked to prepare some documents, she decided to handle phone calls because it seemed more fun. While John and I were away, she ended up behaving rudely to the person in charge from Company A. Of course, I got a call to confirm this, Richard explained. Hearing this, I was so shocked that I instinctively covered my mouth with my hand. I can't believe Jessica would do something like that, I murmured, filled with disbelief. The thought that Jessica's actions might lead to the downfall of our company flashed through my mind, filling me with dread. However, as I wallowed in these anxious thoughts, the story took an unexpected turn. When I explained the situation, they suggested it might be time to end the family business. We had mentioned this to you before, right? About being absorbed by another company, the president of company A stepped forward, expressing his interest if Sarah and I were involved. This was an unexpected yet long hoped-for development. With a family-run business, there are limitations, and it's uncertain whether we could consistently acquire stable customers. That's why John had always been working hard in sales, trying to secure new clients. Being absorbed by a larger company could mean securing a steady customer base. The once uncertain future suddenly seemed to hold a glimmer of hope. However, this news brought relief only to me, John, and his father. John's mother suddenly opposed the idea, saying, "That's not acceptable. John must become the president. This company is ours, isn't it?" I was taken aback by this sudden change in the situation. It seemed that more than a stable future, Nancy was concerned about maintaining the status of being part of a company president's family. And you're telling me he's not going to be the president anymore? Absolutely not acceptable, exclaimed Nancy passionately. This commotion piqued Jessica's interest, leading her to come down to the living room to see what was happening. In response to the chaos started by Nancy, Richard spoke up with a calm but final statement. I am divorcing you, so either way, you will no longer be part of this executive family. Not only have you not changed your attitude towards my wife, but you also neglect household chores. To top it off, you spend your days out with young men instead of being home. I have no intention of supporting such a wife any longer. This was news to both me and John. We were so shocked that we could only stare at Sarah's father-in-law with wide eyes. It seemed he had planned to discuss divorce from the beginning, as he took out divorce papers and a photo of Nancy with a young man from the living room shelf, placing them on the table. If you sign the divorce papers now and leave with your belongings, I won't demand alimony. I know getting any money from you would be futile anyway, he added. Divorce? How can you say that? Haven't I devoted myself to this house all these years? Have you done any proper housework in these last 10 years? Have you ever helped with the business? Does spending someone else's money on young men count as devotion to the house? It was the first time we saw Sarah's usually mild-mannered and reserved father-in-law this angry. Seeing this, Jessica, who had come down to the living room, was visibly trembling from the shock. Jessica, you're part of this too. You came back home because you couldn't make it in Manhattan. And now you can't find a job but still act all high and mighty. In the end, you stopped working entirely. Whose escapism did you inherit? It's time for you to leave this house, he continued. Next, we saw Jessica's shock and resistance. She believed she was an important member of the family, but the reality was different. Wait a minute, Dad. Mom might be a lost cause, but I'm your precious daughter, right? The family conflict deepened as Jessica asserted her place, revealing her betrayal towards her mother. Nancy was astounded, feeling betrayed by her daughter at the last moment. However, as the two started to create a commotion, he sternly silenced them with a shout. If I just kick you out, it'll cause trouble for everyone. So, I've asked an acquaintance to take you in. They'll be here soon to pick you up. Get your minimum belongings ready. Left with no choice but to obey, Nancy began packing her belongings with Jessica. After writing the divorce notice, an acquaintance of the stepfather arrived to take Nancy and Jessica away. The person who came to pick them up was running a factory with dormitories, and it seemed they would be working there. John, Richard, and I talked to the employees about the company being absorbed and prepared for the busy days ahead for our future. Finally, I found out I was pregnant at that time. When I told the president of Company A, he was delighted and promised to send someone to replace me, which was a huge relief. Currently, John and Richard are working even harder for the sake of our upcoming child.